Hello everyone, back at it again. Today I'm going over the 7 habits of highly effective people. This is part 1. I'm breaking up into 2 parts, so this video will have habits 1 through 3, and the second video will have habits 4 through 7. So there's a lot of information to cover, so let's get right into it. So habit 1, be proactive. So what this means is rather than being reactive, you be proactive, right? It basically, like, what the habit is trying to say is that you are in control, right? You're not a Pavlov's dog, right? You're not an animal, right? You're a human, right? I mean, like, yeah, we're technically animals, but we have something called conscious, right? And that's the ability to kind of know, kind of determine right and wrong, and we have free will, which is the ability to choose what we do. We're independent, right? We're not kind of, so there's a chart where it's stimulus, then there's an arrow, and then response, right? That's the typical flow of life, right? That's typically how life works, right? And the Pavlov dog experiment, right? It's like the guy rings a bell and then the dog starts drooling, right? It's like stimulus is the bell and the response is the dog drooling, right? But us as humans, we have the ability to receive that stimulus, right? Process it through our brains, right? And decide what response we want to give, right? We have the gap between stimulus and response. We have that ability to look at it and be like, oh, well, my first response is to do this, but it'd be smarter to do this, right? This, like, you look in that gap and you have that ability. A lot of people, they're reactive. They just go with it, right? Like, something happens, they react immediately, right? They don't use that ability to think, right? Which is something you should work on if you're just reactive, because being proactive, it's really the beginning of becoming effective. So on top of being proactive, this habit also describes taking initiative, right? And I mean, that is part of being proactive, right? So it's sort of seeing the stimulus, right? And then using your free will and independent self to go on to do a positive thing rather than a neutral or a negative thing, right? That's what reactive people do typically, is they get this response and then they do either a negative response or a neutral response, right? So if you're proactive, you can take what's happening and then kind of be like, okay, if this is happening, right, say it's a bad situation, right, and you can okay, how can I make this work, right? And then boom, you go through your mind and then you figure out a solution to that, right? The example it gives in the book is, so it's a company, right, that's having trouble during a recession, right? And they get together it's like a 3-day meeting. So day 1, they're like, oh man, this is not great, what's happening, oh my gosh, right? Day 2, they realize, yeah, it's not gonna get better, it's gonna get worse before it gets better, right? But day 3, they ask the question, what is our response? What can we do, essentially? And then they got together and they brainstormed proactively, right? They took initiative and they proactively brainstormed things that they could do, like managing, cutting costs, increasing their market share. So even during this economic downturn, right, they're cutting costs, they're fixing their management, and they're expanding their market share. So in reality, business is better than ever, right? And yeah, it's gonna get worse before it gets better, right? But they're increasing their market share, so it's gonna be better whenever it's up. And it's that kind of thinking, right? It's Like, yes, we're in like a bad place, but what we're doing is really good for us. So really business is better than ever, right? And it's not like kind of not facing reality, right? Because they did face the reality of the situation. They're like, yeah, it's not going to be good, but what we're doing is going to help us. I think that describes it pretty well. So a way you can kind of start to be proactive is not only starting to exercise that kind of pause before response after you get a stimulus, but also change your language. So don't say that you're like kind of controlled by stuff, right? An example of this is, the classic, I don't have time, right? So you're like, what that really says is like you're being controlled by limited time. Are you? Like you're just kind of giving up responsibility there and being like, well, yeah, I'm not in control of my life. I'm not in control of whatever of my time. So you gotta kind of change your language and be like, yes, it's like I have the freedom to choose whatever I want to do, right? And if you say you don't have the time, you probably do. Like, just check your phone. Another example of change your language is, so let's just say you say, I have to do something. Well, do you have to, or do you choose to do it just because you want to, like, prefer the consequences if you didn't do that action, right? The principle is that you are in control, right? You are the master, right? You determine like what you do in your life. It's not saying like you have control over everything, right? Because you don't, right? But you control your choices, right? And that's kind of what this next part is. So the book describes two circles, right? The circle of influence and then your circle of concern. So your circle of influence is the things you can directly control, right? And in the center of that, like the base circle of influence that you have is your mind, right? And and so you work on expanding your circle of influence and shrinking your circle of concern, right? Because your circle of influence is growing, right? So you can work into that concern. So I didn't describe, so circle of concern is, stuff that you're worried about, but you're not in control of. Like, I don't know, like the boogeyman or something, something that you literally cannot control no matter how hard you try, right? It's like out of your reach. But so by focusing on your circle of influence, you're not only being proactive, but you're kind of lessening the worries, I guess. Because like, if you think about it, like there's really no point in worrying about the circle of concern because it's out of your control. Why worry about it, right? Like you can't control other people's actions really. All you can do is kind of try and help them out and guide them, right? That's the most you can do. You can't control exactly what they'll do. So don't worry about it, just kind of try and guide them to your circle of influence, right? So the example it gives in the book for kind of expanding your circle of influence was a man in a business and like the executive, right? So the executive, he did what the book calls go for delegation, like do this, do that, do this, do that, right? And like all the people on this board were like, man, we don't like this guy, he's kind of lame, right? But then one of the guys on the board, right, they didn't have that opinion of the executive, right? They knew what the executive's concerns were because they had empathetically listened to him, right there, and then they realized like, okay, he wants this, this, and this done, so I'm gonna do it this way, and kind of serve it this way, right? And so after doing that, he kind of gains the executive's favor almost, right? Because the executive's like, wow, this guy, he does all of this and this, and he makes recommendations based on my concerns. Like he's like, wow, And so in the next board meeting, the executive is like, do this, and this, and then But to that one guy who helped him out, right, he was like, what do you think? Right? He didn't delegate anything to him. He's just like, what do you think? And so that's kind of how the one guy on the board kind of expanded his circle of influence. Is he listened to the concerns, right, and then he took initiative and was like, okay, let's work with this guy, work with his strengths, and then kind of compensate for his weaknesses. And yeah, so that's really what he was doing, is he was working on his circle of influence, right? He was able to influence the executive because he had taken steps to, control his listening, right? He actively listened to the executive's concerns, right? He understood what the executive was talking about, right? He's like, okay, well, I can control doing this, so I'm gonna do that, and then that'll grow my circle of influence. And so he did. I hope that example makes sense. Habit 2, begin with the end in mind. What does that mean, begin with the end in mind? How do you begin with the end? What? Well, picture this, right? Picture yourself going to your own funeral. Now that might sound kind of strange, but bear with me. So you go to your funeral, right? It's an open casket, right? It's like you see you're dead, right? Like, oh my gosh, I'm dead. Go sit down, right? Make sure you're imagining this in your head, right? Go sit down and then listen to and there's going to be 4 speakers. There's going to be one from your family, right? You choose who that'll be, like, a son, your wife, your mom, your dad, whoever, right? Whoever from your family. You'll have one of your friends, right? One of your close buds, one of your homies, and you'll have someone from your work, and then you'll have someone from like an organization or like a church thing that like you're a part of, right? Those are the 4 speakers. So what do you want them to say about you after you're gone? What kind of legacy do you want to leave behind? This is what Habit 2 is all about, is beginning with the end in mind. So really think about what you want each of them to say about you. Maybe you were kind, right? Kind to your wife, right? You were loving to your children. You were, the hardest worker at your work. You were the most creative. For that church, you were generous, and you helped the church out a lot and stuff like that. Like, having that kind of end goal in mind is how you can begin. It's really weird thinking of that, right? But it kind of sets the precedent, right? Like, okay, I want this to be said about me when I'm gone. So how can I work and prioritize my life to where the people are saying that after I'm gone, right? That's like a random example, being like I want to be the best football player of all time, right? So, okay, if you want to be remembered as that, you gotta train like a football player, like train super hard. You gotta be, the best teammate. You gotta be the best in your position, right? You gotta really work hard, and then, work with the coaches and with your teammates to where you kind of propel up to that level of like the greatest ever, right? The GOAT, right? Yeah, like if you want to be remembered as X thing, you have to set your life to build up to that, right? Because you don't just become the greatest football player of all time out of thin air, right? That just doesn't happen. You have to put in the work and actually play the game, right? Essentially, Habit 2 is saying you write the programming of your own life, right? You are this is what you can do to write the program, pretty much. While Habit 1 was like pretty much saying you are the programmer, you are in control. One way you can do this is by writing a mission statement. So my mission statement's up there. I'm not going to show it to you because this camera set's really annoying to set up. I need to get like a tripod. But I have a mission statement. It's kind of copied off an example in the book. Here, let me grab that real quick. We'll cut over to that. Okay, so here is the mission statement. I kind of use this as a template from the book. I don't know if you can read that very well, but it says, my mission is blah 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 blah. To fulfill this mission, I have charity, I sacrifice, I inspire, I'm impactful. Then these roles take priority in achieving my mission. Husband, well, I'm not a husband, but I put teammate, son, scholar, stuff like that. But yeah, so what it kind of describes is the roles that you have in your life. So, good example is you're probably someone's son or daughter, right? So, what's your responsibility in that role? Is it, just be a good son, be respectful to your parents and your siblings? Is it, be present for your family if they're going through trouble? It's different for every family, but for me, I put just be respectful and a good son, that stuff, and that will kind of propel me to what people will say about me when I'm dead, right? They'll be he was such a great son. Obviously, I hope I don't die before my parents, but if I did, being a good son, right? That's what they'll say about me if I were to die, right? They'd be he was a good son. He's really driven, like that kind of stuff. And I have it all written down. I'll probably show it to you in the next video if I can. I might just take a picture of it. So on top of the roles, you can also add on goals you want for those roles, right? If you were a father, you can be well, for my kids, I want them to be happy and be strong, right? I want to raise them to be good kids, right? That's a goal, right? So that you can kind of put that in your mission statement and be like as a father, I will kind of raise my kids right, something like that. Don't copy me word for word. I really suggest reading the book itself because there's just so much there. I'm just describing the principles right now. Another thing you can do to write your mission statement, more information you can put in, is who are your role models, right? Mine is Abraham Lincoln, Imagaji, Hamza, who else? My dad, David Goggins, who else? I don't know, just a bunch of self-improvement people, and just motivational stuff, right? Those are my role models, right? What qualities do they have that I want to develop, right? All right, so let's just say Hamza, right? He's really, to me, he's really passionate about what he does, and I kind of want to develop that, right? So it's okay, that's what he does, so I'm gonna try and develop that in myself, right? So Imagaji is he's a cool, confident character, right? I was okay, I want to do that, right? It's kind of the character select if you're making some character, right? It's character select, personality traits, cool, confidence, boom, passionate about work, boom, selecting that stuff. So think of it that way, right? Finally, another thing you can do to write your mission statement is you can reach back to the funeral idea that I like the funeral situation I talked about, where you're at your own funeral, and kind of make a chart. So here, I'll pull it up in the book. So here, so it says this, right? So it's like area activity. So your family, your friends, work, church, community, so church/community service. And so write in these boxes, like, what would they say about your character? What would they say were your contributions, and what would they say your achievements were, right? So make that chart, and really be honest what you want them to say. Really be brutally honest, right? So I've written down stuff like, yeah, he was driven, he was really disciplined, he was the hardest worker, he was successful. Like, his contributions were, he retired his parents, I guess that was his achievements. He retired his parents, he's rich, successful, wealthy, like that kind of stuff, right? Like that's the stuff I wrote down. Of course, it might be different for everyone, but really think about what you want to kind of be remembered for, and go ahead and write that down on that chart. The importance of making a mission statement is, I'd say, pretty high, right? It's like a very important thing, because it kind of gives you direction, right? So I mean, yes, there's that initial direction of, okay, what do I want to be remembered by? But the mission statement kind of clarifies it and puts it in words in front of you, right? That's why I have it written down like by my door, right? Because then I look at it every single day, and I get to kind of be like, okay, yes, this is my mission. What are the priorities I need to be doing this week and today to work towards that ultimate goal? So I think everyone should write a mission statement. Keep it somewhere that's visible, and something something you interact with every single day. You might just put it on your phone lock screen, right? Like that's okay too. Like, just something you interact with every day, so you can see it, like, okay, yes, this is my mission statement, let's roll. So okay, this is my priorities. So the mission statement kind of just gives you a sense of daily direction, if you will. Habit 3, put first things first. So what this habit is really about is kind of organizing. So in the first habit is saying you are the program, you are the programmer. Habit 2 is saying, write the program. And this habit 3 is saying live the program. Like run the program. Let's go. Organize. So there are 4 types of activities. So 1 is important and urgent, right? Like the crises and the really urgent phone calls, oh no, my mom, I have 15 missed calls from mom, oh my gosh, I need to call my mom, like that kind of stuff. And then there's the second one is important but non-urgent stuff. So what this entails is a lot of activities like reading, exercising, planning, preventing crises from happening. It's like that super productive stuff, right? Then the third type of activity is not important, urgent stuff. So it's like some email that you see, or it's it's not important, but you should get it done right now, And then 4 is non-urgent, not important stuff. So it's leisurely activities, like watching TV, that's activity 4. It puts those in quadrants, so that's quadrant 4 activity. And you don't want to be doing quadrant 4 activity, because it's just not important or productive. So what you want to be doing most of the time is focusing most of your time in the second activity, so non-urgent important matters, because when you focus in the non-urgent and important things, you take time away from the non-important things, right? So like, why would you want to be doing non-important things? This doesn't make sense, right? Like, everything you should be doing should be important and impactful, like, to your life almost, right? So try and cut out not important activities as much as possible and move that time to, not urgent but important activities, like exercising, like reading, planning your week, stuff like that. Because when you do more of the non-important, the important non-urgent things, then the less urgent important things you have to deal with. So an example of a crisis is, let's just say it's a health crisis, right? You can prevent that by exercising, right? That's why, like let's just say, like, your heart, you develop like a heart problem, right? Like, maybe that could have been prevented if you had exercised like more throughout your life, right? So, or let's just say, you have broken bones or something, like your bones are brittle because you don't have enough calcium. Like, let's just say something like that, right? You could prevent that, right, by focusing on your nutrition and getting that calcium in, right? I hope that example made sense. So you should be really focusing a lot of your time to important non-urgent activities, because it'll decrease the urgent important activities. Of course, you'll have, the random crises, like maybe you get in a car crash or something, right? Like, yeah, that is a crisis, and it just happens. There's not much you can do to prevent that other than being a good driver, right? So, you will have crises, right? It's bound to happen eventually, right? But you can kind of limit your time to mostly the important non-urgent stuff, and a little bit towards the urgent important stuff, right? And so you can just kind of eliminate the not important stuff altogether, because it's not important for a reason. So why would you need to do it? So the next part of this chapter is kind of talking about effective organizing, right? So there's like first generation, second generation, third generation, and now fourth generation, like, planning, right? So some people do first and second. It's like really basic kind of planners stuff, and then third generation is like a daily planner, whereas like you plan out each hour of your day. But the problems with all of these is, either they're too loosey-goosey, or they're not flexible enough. Like Daily Planner 3, no hate to it, right? But it lacks a lot of flexibility. It's good if you can follow that, because you got like a rigid military schedule. You're doing this and then you do this, and like a by the minute kind of thing. But the problem is that, there is, like, if you have a life, right? Like if you have life events happen, chances are you're not going to be able to fulfill like every single minute, right? And sometimes it's going to take longer than you expect, right? So longer than you plan, right? So the example it gives in the book is the author is talking about his son, how he organized his day, and he had like 15 minutes to break up with his girlfriend, right? And then like he gets on the call, and then like an hour and a half passes, and he's still on the phone trying to break up with his girlfriend, right? And so, that's kind of the issue with those daily planners, that sometimes, life gets in the way, and, you can't follow that rigid schedule completely. And so you kind of get discouraged that you can't follow it, even though you've made a commitment to it, and then you just kind of drop it, right? And then you have no plan in at all. So the fourth generation planner it presents is kind of prioritizing your priorities, right? Your goals first, based on the roles that you mentioned in your mission statement. So you kind of like, okay, as a parent, I need to do this for my son this week, right? I need to help him with his science project. And so you kind of plan that out in your planner. Be like, okay, on Wednesday around 8 o'clock, right? Like that, like the priority for that day is help Timmy with his science project. So here's an example. Here's the example of that. As you can see, there's the weekly priorities, right? So you write all of those weekly priorities down. So let's just say, it's like help Timmy with his science project, complete a project at work, and buy something. so you write those down here, right? And then say on Wednesday you need to help Timmy with his science project, so you write that on the today's priorities, and then you kind of schedule out a time where you do that, right? So I copied this down on my computer, and it's been kind of helpful. I don't think I've made as much of a commitment as I should have to it yet, but it is, I would say it's better because it's more flexible than a minute daily schedule. Because I found doing a daily minute schedule, like minute by minute, it was really hard to follow because I can't be efficient with people. Like I can be efficient with things. It says this in the book. Like you can't be efficient with people. You can only be effective with them, because sometimes you just have to spend more time doing something, especially if it involves people, right? You can't be efficient with people, yet you can only be effective. So yeah, right. And I'm still at home, so I gotta deal with people. So yeah, that's why I think the weekly schedule is just a little bit, like the weekly planner is just a little bit better, because I get to kind of plan out my week a little bit, and it's flexible enough to where I can work with other people if need be. How to delegate tasks properly is another part in this chapter. So it's a part of the organization, right? And increasing your PC or production capability, right? So it'll also help kind of get you to like just do more, I guess. So like you're kind of organizing and delegating, right? So there's two kinds of delegating that it describes in the books. Gopher delegation is the kind of, you need to do this, 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 right? Go do this, do that, blah, blah, blah. Blah, go. Right? You're kind of like over their shoulder the entire time. I mean, sure, it might work sometimes, but it's not effective. The second type of delegation it talks about in the video, in this video, but in the book, it talks about stewardship delegation. So what that means is you kind of list out the desired results, right? You list out the guidelines in which they're supposed to follow to get those results. Not how to do it, mind you, right? The guidelines, right? Like what they're like not supposed to do, right? Like they can do it any way they want except this, right? Because what you're really looking for is the results, right? You're not trying to go for delegate them and control the way they do it, right? You're just making sure they don't cross the line, right? So it's like, I need you to make 50 hamburgers, but they can't be made with human or like they need to be made with normal meat, right? Not human meat, right? Right? Like it's like, it doesn't matter to me. Like what you do, you can, like if you were to put them through a grinder, just chop them up yourself. It doesn't matter, right? But I need 50 burgers, right? But they have to be like X meat, like like beef, right? They have to be pork. They have to be chicken, like whatever it might be. That kind of got weird, but that's kind of what it is desired results. Okay, I want 50 I want 50 hamburger patties. Guidelines, right? You can only use like this meat, right? You're not talking about the method in which you get the hamburger patties, but it can only be this meat, right? It has to be like grass fed or whatever. And then oh geez, I forgot the third one. I'm gonna cut. Okay, the third thing is, if you know what could go wrong, like you kind of been through the thing, like maybe you probably shouldn't chop up the meat, just put it through a grinder instead. Like you probably shouldn't chop up the meat, right? It's like if you know what not to do, tell them, right? It's like if the example it brings up in the book is mowing, like mowing a lawn, right? So like going along with that example, you could be like, well, you probably shouldn't cut the lawn with scissors, because that would take way too long. Right? I mean, like that's a pretty obvious example, but it's like that sort of thing. Like you probably shouldn't do it this way, so don't do it that way. But I'm not like, don't tell them the exact way they do it, because they're responsible for the results, because you're delegating the task to them, right? They have to feel like they're responsible for the results. Next, identify resources for them. So, what kind of things could they use? Let's go back to the lawnmower example, right? So, to mow the lawn, you have access to yourself. If you want to clean up the lawn, you have, like a dog pooper scooper. You have a lawnmower to, mow the lawn with. And you have, me, like I can help you do X thing, right? Like that's human technical resources, right? Like, and so you specify those resources to them, like, okay, you have this, and this, to do the task. Next, you need to set up standards of accountability. So what that means is have standards of performance, right? It's like, you mow the lawn, you clean up everything, it's gold star, right? And like you didn't mow the lawn at all and it looks dirty, is like negative 10 points. Like some kind of almost a grading system for their job, and setting up consequences, good and bad, for what the results of that evaluation that you set up. And on top of that, set up like regular times that you'll be evaluating this task, right? So like say you need to, the lawn needs to be green and it needs to be clean, right? That's the example it has in the book. And you'll survey it every Sunday, right? Every other Sunday, right? And so if every other Sunday passes, and like let's just say I'm talking to you, like you're the steward of the lawn now, like you need to make sure the lawn is green and clean. And so like every 2 weeks I'm gonna check in with you, and if it's not green and clean, then bad consequence, bad, you get timeout. I don't know, something like that. Like, you can't be on your phone for the next day, like you're grounded. Or, like, oh yes, you did clean it's green and clean, that's good. I like that. So, here's $5 or something like that. Make sure those consequences are clear for accountability. So that's a wrap on part 1. Part 2 will come out, the next time I upload. I suggest you watch these videos together. If you're not watching this like when this video is like being first uploaded, if I do finish video 2 sooner, I will probably upload it before like my schedules do, just because I want to get these videos out like together. So yeah, that's all for today. If the video is if you're watching this like later on and the second video is up, go watch it. I'll probably link it up here in the future. Go watch that video to kind of continue on your learning of the 7 habits. And be better and have a W day.